السادة والسيدات، نرحب بكم من جديد مباشرة إلى عرض بعنوان إنشاء سلاسل توريد صناعية جديدة في المملكة العربية السعودية، وكيف يمكن دعم المنشآت الصغيرة والمتوسطة الجديدة. يقدم هذا العرض الأستاذ كنان نويلاتي، وهو مهندس معتمد من المملكة المتحدة، يشغل حاليا منصب رئيس المشتريات وسلسلة الإمداد والمحتوى المحلي في شركة KPMG في المملكة العربية السعودية. لديه أكثر من 30 عاما من الخبرة العالمية في تقديم سلسلة الإمداد وبرامج المحتوى المحلي. يعمل مع القطاعين العام والخاص في الشرق الأوسط منذ 12 عاما، كما يعمل مع القطاع العام في المملكة العربية السعودية لتحسين توطين سلاسل التوريد، وحاصل على درجة الماجستير في الهندسة، وأيضا ماجستير في إدارة الأعمال من المملكة المتحدة. أستاذ كنان، الحديث إليك الآن.
شكرا كتير عبد الله. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for making it back after the lunch break. Whenever I get this slot, I always find it's a struggle to get everybody back from their lunch break. So what I'm going to talk about today is growing new industrial supply chains. We've heard this topic being mentioned yesterday by many of our distinguished guests. It's very important that we recognize that small and medium enterprises require support to grow, especially industrial small and medium enterprises. And this is how we're going to build local industries. So I want to use this next 20 minutes, 30 minutes to announce the launch of a new paper that we're going to have available later this week, which talks about how do Saudi Arabia support the growth and the maturity, the development of small and medium enterprises. First of all, I just want to start by saying, before this paper, there was a paper that we recently launched which was focused on leveraging data to establish local supply chains. So this paper, which I will encourage you to grab, looks at the value from data to support local content in Saudi Arabia. And I actually encourage you to go to the Ministry of Industry booth, which has a very nice prototype that shows you how data can be leveraged by investors, by all entities, all stakeholders, and I congratulate Ministry of Industry on its achievement in that to date. This paper is available in both languages, so you can get it in Arabic and in English. But let's focus today on the paper at hand. This paper, as I said, specifically looks at supporting industrial supply chains in the kingdom. So we will touch on a few elements of that paper today, ahead of you getting a full copy of it. We will be talking about the SME ecosystem. What are the entities in Saudi Arabia today that support small and medium enterprises? And we'll also be talking about how SMEs play a vital role in the Saudi economy. It's very important to recognize the journey that they have to take from inception to actually being a mature organization based in Saudi Arabia, but also serving the global standards and global clients and global ecosystem. So there are challenges facing new industrial SMEs. So we'll be talking about that as well. What are those challenges for the SMEs, and what can we do about them? How can we support them? And I think it's very important to look outside the kingdom sometimes to see benchmarks, examples of how other countries are setting up initiatives and programs to support SMEs. And there are many good examples that you'll see being pointed at in the paper, and I'll share some of those headlines with you today. And I also wanted to mention and thank UNIDO for their presence and their contribution because they do provide extensive support to SMEs through their ITPO entity in the region. And we can talk about that in a minute as well. And finally, we'll try today just to summarize what are the key messages really for us on how we can improve that support for SMEs. So let me go and give you some of the key highlights. So first of all, I think we should understand why this is important. I think the first thing to do is to all align on the objectives. So the objectives here is to diversify the source of revenue, to increase the contribution of the SMEs to the industrial sector, and also support emerging industrial enterprises in the kingdom. Those emerging industrial enterprises need also support from SMEs and vice versa. So it's actually an ecosystem that's very important to establish, and all countries who've developed their local content over the years have actually gone through a similar journey. Now, there are challenges that we need to recognize together. One of them is really important, is in how do we increase the participation? Yesterday we heard in some of the panels that participation may not be as great as it should be. So small and medium enterprises need to be given the right environment to participate in the industrial economy. We should be developing them while addressing their challenges. And this is one of the things that we're talking about here today. So the desired outcome should really be both financial and non-financial. You can't just throw money at everything. You need to also give SMEs advice, knowledge transfer, and as much direction and networking opportunities as possible to allow them to thrive. And obviously we should be facilitating their evolution so they can become a true international player. The ultimate objective here, obviously, of SMEs in the kingdom is also to become at global standards and also to export. We want our local firms to export globally. So now that we recognize why it's important, let's also recognize the good work that some entities are already doing in the kingdom. I've only just named 4 here. It's obviously only the tip of the iceberg. There are other entities today in Saudi Arabia who are really contributing towards SMEs. But I just wanted to mention those 4 for now. إنشاء with its Jadid program is doing a great job in increasing the productivity and the connectivity of SMEs with their clients or potential clients. The idea is to increase the contribution to GDP from 20% to 35% by 2030. They are developing, Munsha'at is developing policies and standards, doing a lot of knowledge transfer, and also joining all the different entities, ministries, authorities together to create further collaboration. So I think this is very, very promising and good to have. The Ministry of Investment is also doing partnerships with international businesses. It's encouraging investors to create more SMEs, and it's also providing a lot of matchmaking and connectivity with different stakeholders. So that's very good. Ministry of Finance, really important to mention here with its supply chain financing agreements and also with its financial sector development program. These are just 2 examples of the many good things that the Ministry of Finance is doing. And obviously we shouldn't forget the big role that the Ministry of Industry and Minerals is playing today by, for example, partnering with the Association of Supply Chain and Procurement, but also collaborating with the different national entities such as NIDC, NIIC, LCGPA, etc. This is really a big role being played by the ministry and many initiatives, including the one you heard about yesterday, the Local Supply Chain Development Initiative. So maybe just to talk about some facts here in terms of what we're talking about. We are talking about a target SME contribution to GDP of 35%. This is quite important. This is quite large. It's an achievement. It's already heading in the right direction. We should not forget that the private sector workforce consists of a good 2/3, 62% of what you have in the kingdom. You have 750,000 plus SMEs. So we are talking about huge numbers, and it's growing very fast. 15% quarterly growth is tremendous. It's something that we should all be proud of and be ready to support. So if you ask what does it mean really to have an increase to 35% by 2030, it's going to result in a lot of good things. I've just listed some of them here. Obviously, apart from income generation, employment creation, better security of supply. We've all seen the pandemic recently, what it did to us. So we need to have better presence of local suppliers, and we need skilled local industrial base to allow us to be industry self-sustaining. So that sustainable, generating that sustainable livelihood while reducing cost is really a big achievement that hopefully, inshallah, we will have by 2030. If we just talk about the journey that the industrial SMEs need to follow here, obviously it's a long journey, the SMEs. I don't want to belittle it by just showing you 4 steps, but it just goes without saying that we are talking about supporting the SMEs from the first step, which is the inception, the new investment, identifying those opportunities, identifying the gaps in the industrial supply chains and where SMEs can play, encouraging those SMEs to set up and commence manufacturing, to widening their client footprint, and also, like I said earlier, to become much more international and start to export. So there are many things, and I've just thrown a few here, many things that we can do to help that. But just to put some clarification in terms of examples, take the developed local network of clients. We can, today SMEs don't have, in the start of their journey, don't have the financial means to start the qualification process with the big clients, for example, state-owned enterprises, having the technology to set up the ways of communication online, for example, to employ the right number of staff. So there's quite a few things that we can support SMEs on to become that global, mature entity. Now, the challenges facing industrial SMEs, I've listed here 4 in the central circle, which really I'd like to talk about, if you allow me. So the first one is attracting foreign investments. This is really key. Having the visibility and having the attractiveness for foreign investments has been a struggle for some of the SMEs that we have seen. And also attracting at the same time a skilled workforce to allow this SME to be able to actually live up to its promises, to live up to its expectations. At the same time, those SMEs, they have the struggle, the challenge of maintaining the fluctuations in supply and demand. So the typical example here is when you work with SMEs, you want to give them your demand over a long period of time so they can plan accordingly and manage their cost. And last but not least, the regulations, the regulatory challenges in the kingdom, the more we can do to make this easier for them to manage, the better. So on one hand, they need the money, they need the skills, they need to manage the operations, the fluctuations, and manage the kingdom's regulations and to set up their local supply chains. So there are things that we do, example solutions. I showed those around the edges. You may resonate with many of those. These are obviously not the solutions, but just example of solutions that we can provide SMEs. I just want to go on next by giving you some examples of what other countries are doing. These are 4 countries that I've picked on, and they are further elaborated in the paper. Australia, Singapore, Malaysia, UAE are all good examples of countries where they have implemented initiatives to support SMEs. One theme, if I may call it, is buy or make locally. Now, I think the Kingdom has already started doing some of those initiatives. But if you take the example of Australia and UAE, they have programs, buy local policy or make it in the Emirates program. They're very good examples that I would encourage you to explore because I think they are good practice. There are other examples, technology focused. So integrate more technology to assist SMEs. There's been I'll give you an example outside these. In Brazil, for example, where they would have a marketplace where SMEs don't have to have technology purchased, implemented. They can just, through a normal sort of browser, start accessing all sorts of networking and business opportunities. In Malaysia, the National Talent Enhancement Program is fantastic in terms of human capital incentive program, encouraging more skill development to support SMEs. And we'll talk about later how all of this can link to educational institutions to make sure that we have an ecosystem where we know what we need and we can actually go upstream to where the skills come from and get those. Now, I mentioned UNIDO earlier. I think it's worth just touching on that for a minute. So UNIDO is UN, United Nations Industrial Development Organization, has done fantastic things in the region. It offers extensive support to SMEs through its Investment and Technology Promotion Office. It actually happens to sit in Bahrain, but it does provide support to Saudi Arabia and other countries in the region. So really it provides a spectrum of services to investors and entrepreneurs. And I thought I'd mention that because it's really a good example of how we should be potentially working. I'm not saying leave it all to UNIDO to solve it for you. I'm showing it to you as an example of the themes, the activities that they are doing that we could potentially mirror more and more in the Kingdom. This business counseling to setting up the SMEs, setting up joint ventures, bringing investors to industrial supply chains to grow them. And there's a couple of examples here of alliances that were forged recently. The Arab International Center for Entrepreneurship and Investment and the Enterprise Development and Investment Promotion Program. Both very good examples of alliances. Alliances is something that's been happening for decades now across the world, where you bring basically the best of all worlds together to deliver your objective. And this is no different. You can actually forge a very good alliance with international and local players to offer startups and existing SMEs the opportunity to grow and establish themselves. It all leads to innovation and all leads to capacity building, which is what we need for SMEs. Just moving on to what do Saudi industrial SMEs need. So we really need to push the envelope here, push the boundary, and get SMEs to work. And there's 5 things that probably we should be focusing on and recognize that SMEs should be focusing on. Because if we don't know what SMEs need, how can we tell what support they need, right? So these are 5 things that just extracted from the paper to share with you today. It's very important for you to get yourself in their mindset. They need to do market research, right? They need to understand their market, they need to understand their supply chain, top to bottom. They need to understand the dynamics and their client base. So conducting that regional industry-based market sizing and resource estimation is important. Now, I just pause there and ask yourself, well, how can we help? So we can provide a database full of information to them. We can actually give them access to different information. We can guide them on how to maneuver the knowledge barrier, if you like. I won't go through each one in detail, but just to, you know, there is something about digitizing fast. SMEs cannot afford just to come in and do everything manual. They need to digitize. They need to leverage technology to connect with their peers and their clients and sub-suppliers where required. And they need to go to market very quickly. So they need to accelerate that innovation and product development very quickly. Again, how can we help? How can we support them? Think of their issues. And last but not least, people hesitate with SMEs because they say, I'm not sure about their quality management. They need to focus on quality management. They need to improve their quality. What can we do to make sure we give them that feedback, we give them that knowledge, those best practices on how to produce an industry high quality product or service? So manufacturing product with high export potential is very important. When we want to encourage international investors to believe in them or international clients to believe in SMEs in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, they need to be confident that the quality is good. So how can we support them to do that? I will start concluding by highlighting 3 areas where we can potentially support. Now, these are not specific projects. I don't want you to think of them as like one thing. I think there's 3 themes that I'd like to touch on. The first theme is we need to combine financial support with advisory services. And the emphasis is on advisory services because they need access to, okay, fine, they need access to financial government programs, but how can we couple that with targeted non-financial advice, specific industrial non-financial advice? So we need to provide SMEs with information, connections, partners, access to growth initiatives. And I think I mentioned Jadid as an example earlier. That's a good example, but a lot can be done, a lot more in terms of the number of SMEs participating and in terms of the level of information that can be provided. International standards and conformity with those is very important. How can small SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, get access to that? So we need to actually have the right initiatives and the right authorities in place to facilitate that. One example I wanted to mention to you here is the EDB, the Economic Development Board in Singapore. It's a very good agency. It's actually providing today companies with information. That's what it does. It allows those SMEs to partner and access government transformation and growth initiatives, and also allows them access to global investors and information. Another area to look at is the regulatory landscape. I mentioned this earlier. I want to come back to it again because implementing policies to support SMEs and government tenders is only part of the solution. There needs to be further initiatives to allow SMEs the opportunity to participate in local market. How do we encourage investors to give local SMEs that opportunity is really the question. So we need a cohesive regulatory framework that pulls everybody together, that allows ease of doing business for those SMEs and promote investor interest. So I realize this one is a big one. It involves many stakeholders, but I think as long as we have the right mindset, we're able to head in the right direction. And one example is Australia. They do have the federal level policies for SMEs. So at federal level, they're able to provide more geographical tailor-made policies. And they actually do a very good job right now in allowing them to access government opportunities through a range of initiatives and price preferences at regional level. as every opportunity that you can think of at regional level is managed regionally. So just one example, you know, sometimes maybe you have to divide the cake into portions to solve the problem. And this is what Australia is doing right now. I mean, more can be done there, I think. And the third and last sort of bucket of area, this area is really important. It's the workforce. The specialized skills workforce. We all realize we all come from the industry, and industrial supply chains are not the same as non-industrial. So I think it's very important to recognize that those skills need to be built up the hard way. It takes longer normally in our industry to build the skills up. So increasing that local employability in the industrial sector requires several measures. We need to liaise with universities and vocational centers. And we need to create some cohesion, some alignment between what's being produced by universities to what's being trained, to what's being deployed, and understand those gaps. And I think that there are committees today in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, like Tawteen, for example, a committee. It is focusing on contract by contract level, and it's focusing on skill by skill in terms of what percentage we can have. But you know, are we really joining the dots from end to end and making sure that the same number of skills is flowing through to the requirements? In Malaysia, I think that the Malaysian government can give us some knowledge there, some of their lessons learned, because they have implemented this human capital incentive program I mentioned earlier, and it's proving to be very good. It is really allowing fresh graduates to be developed and targeted in the right areas. And finally, I just want to summarize by saying there's probably two takeaways that I'd like you to take from today. Obviously, do go and get the paper and read it in full, but I would like to just highlight the fact that the first point is really let's boost the SME participation. Let's find ways for them to participate more, whether it's breaking technology cost or whether it's actually allowing them the network opportunities. Both local industrial development initiatives and global market create those opportunities to scale up. We need to think long term and incentivize those SMEs to accelerate innovation and advance and optimize their productivity. And the second point, really, as a takeaway for you, think of those global value chains. Think of how SMEs can integrate into the global economy as opposed to just local. This needs to be a holistic government approach. It needs strong sponsorship from many of the ministries, such as the Ministry of Industry and Mineral Resources. Everybody needs to come together and provide that financial and non-financial support. Thank you very much, everyone.